I'm Margaret, 72 years old. You can call me Maggie if you want, though I never cared much for the short version. I've had a pretty good life, all things considered. 3 kids, 5 grandkids, a modest house in a small town, and the quiet peace of retirement. But I'll tell you something, nothing prepared me for what happened a few months ago. I thought I had seen it all, but that one moment shattered everything. The one where my daughter, Emily, smiled at me and said, "You're too old to travel with us, Mom," as if I wasn't sitting right there in front of her, as if I didn't matter anymore. That's when everything changed. Now I know what you're thinking. "Oh, Maggie, it's just a casual comment, just one of those things people say." But trust me, it wasn't. It wasn't casual. It was everything. I can still see her face, the way her eyes gleamed with that condescending smile, the way her voice lilted like she was saying something sweet when it was anything but. And the worst part? I had been waiting for this trip for months, my bags already packed, a little excitement bubbling up inside me. The thought that I'd be spending time with Emily, with her family, in some warm, exotic place, was the highlight of my year. So, when she said those words, I couldn't help but feel the coldness seep into my chest. The smile on her face made my skin crawl. "You're too old to travel with us, Mom." Those words echoed in my head long after she'd left the room, and just like that, something inside of me snapped. I'm no fool. I'm not one to let my emotions rule me, not anymore. But that hit different. It was as if she was telling me that I didn't matter, that I was a burden, and I had spent so many years bending over backward for her and her family, making sure they were happy, making sure they felt supported, that I hadn't even noticed how little they were giving me in return. Not until that moment. I sat there frozen. Emily's kids, my grandkids, were running around the living room, oblivious to what was happening. I couldn't even bring myself to look at them. My mind was reeling. Too old to travel? Too old. Who said that? Who decided when I was too old to do anything? And then it hit me. I had spent so many years quietly accepting their neglect, their offhand comments, their dismissals. I had let it go for years, thinking that this was just what mothers did, what grandmothers did. But not anymore. I was done. Done letting them walk all over me. Done with the expectations of being a doting mother and grandmother when no one bothered to appreciate it. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about how I'd spent so many years doing everything for everyone else, running to their aid whenever they needed it. And now I was supposed to be okay with being pushed aside, told that I was too old. Not a chance. I wasn't going to sit quietly in the corner anymore. I wasn't going to beg for their attention or their approval. The next morning, I woke up early. My first thought was to call Emily. I was so angry, so hurt, I could barely see straight. But then I thought better of it. Calling her would do nothing. She'd just brush me off, maybe apologize, and I'd let it go like I always had. No, this time, I was going to do something that would make her notice, something that would shake her up and make her realize just who she was dealing with. So I decided to go on the trip alone. I had saved up for it after all. I'd been planning to go with them, but they had taken that decision from me. Fine, I would go by myself. I called a travel agent, booked a flight to the same destination they were going to, and booked a nice little hotel by the beach. When I finished, I sat back and smiled. Maybe I wasn't too old for anything after all. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Emily, not the grandkids. I just packed my suitcase, grabbed my passport, and boarded a plane alone. When I arrived at the resort, I could feel the excitement bubbling inside me again. I was doing this on my own terms, and it was exhilarating. The warm sun on my skin, the sound of the ocean crashing against the shore, the feeling of freedom, it was everything I had needed and more. A few days in, I checked my phone and saw a message from Emily. She said she missed me and wanted to know if I was having a good time. I didn't respond right away. I wanted her to think about what she'd said. I wanted her to sit with the fact that I had gone without her, without anyone's approval, just because I could. After a couple more days of enjoying my vacation in peace, I decided it was time to call her. I knew I had to say something, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I dialed her number, and when she answered, I could hear the surprise in her voice. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked, as if she was worried I'd gotten lost or hurt. "Oh, everything's fine, honey," I said sweetly. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm here, enjoying the beach, just like you planned for us." I let that hang for a moment and then added, "I hope you're all having fun. I'm having a blast." There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear her brain working overtime, trying to figure out how to handle this. "Mom," she said slowly, "why didn't you tell us you were going?" I smiled to myself, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "Well, I thought it was about time I did something for myself. You told me I was too old to travel with you, so I thought I'd see what it's like to travel on my own. Seems I'm still pretty good at it." Her voice faltered a little. I didn't mean it like that. I was just... "No," I interrupted, my voice firm now. "You meant exactly what you said, Emily, and now you get to see how it feels when someone else makes their own choices, regardless of what you think." I let her sit with that for a moment, the silence between us growing heavy. "I've spent my whole life being there for you, and when I needed you, when I was looking forward to being with you on this trip, you dismissed me. You told me I was too old. And now I'm not just here. I'm living, on my terms." There was a long pause. I could hear her taking deep breaths. Finally, she spoke, her voice much quieter. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. "But you did, and I think it's time I remind you that I'm not just your mother. I'm Margaret. I'm a person too, and I won't let you forget that." When I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't about the apology, not really. It was about me finally standing up for myself, finally taking control of my life. Emily had seen me as just her mother for so long, but now she'd see me for who I truly was, a woman with my own dreams, my own desires, my own sense of worth. I stayed on that trip for another few days, exploring, meeting people, and rediscovering what it felt like to be just me. No labels, no expectations. When I finally came home, things between Emily and me were different. She had apologized, but more than that, she had started to treat me differently. She understood now that I wasn't someone she could push aside. And as for me, I had learned that I didn't need permission from anyone to live my life. I didn't need approval. I didn't need their validation. I was enough, just as I was, and that was the biggest lesson of all. From then on, I wasn't just Mom. I was Margaret, and I was ready to live on my own terms. Everything had changed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of mixed emotions. On the surface, everything seemed normal. I went back to my routine, spent time in the garden, and tried to distract myself with hobbies I hadn't picked up in years. But underneath, I felt a quiet storm brewing. That small, rebellious spark I'd ignited in myself on the beach had begun to grow, and it wasn't something I could ignore anymore. At first, Emily tried to make things right. She called more often, sent me messages about how much she missed me, and for a while I could see that she was genuinely trying. But I wasn't fooled. I'd heard all the words before, all the promises of change. The problem wasn't that she didn't love me. It was that she didn't respect me the way I deserved. And that wasn't something that could be fixed with a few calls or flowers. She had to understand that my worth wasn't up for negotiation, and if she wanted to have a relationship with me, she needed to show up, but not just when it was convenient. I decided to keep my distance, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I didn't want to give her the chance to sweep everything under the rug. I wasn't going to let her make me feel small again. It felt empowering at first, but then as the days turned into weeks, the silence between us began to weigh heavier on me. I missed her. I missed the old days when everything seemed simple, when she wasn't so distant, so caught up in her own life. But the truth was, we were both changing, and I didn't know if it was possible to go back to how things were. One evening I sat in my living room, staring out the window, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. I hadn't heard from Emily in a few days, and though I told myself I wasn't waiting for her call, the emptiness gnawed at me. I had always been the one to reach out, the one to make the first move, but now I wasn't sure if I wanted to anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to open that door again only to be hurt. Just as I was lost in thought, my phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up, my heart skipping a beat when I saw her name. I hesitated for a moment, then swiped the screen. "Hey, Mom, I've been thinking about everything. Can we talk?" I stared at the words for a while, feeling a mix of hope and wariness. This was the moment. The moment where I had to decide whether I would let myself be dragged back into the cycle of disappointment or if I would continue walking the path I had started down. I sat there, breathing slowly as the silence around me grew louder. My thoughts raced, and I realized for the first time in a long while that I was in control. Not her, me. I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm not sure what there is left to talk about, Emily. You made it pretty clear where I stand. I'm not your backup plan, and I'm not going to settle for less than respect." I waited for a response, and when it came, it was different from the usual apologies. She didn't beg me to forgive her. She didn't offer excuses. She just said, "I know. I didn't treat you right. I was selfish. I thought I could control everything, including you. But I can't, and I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm here when you're ready." I read the message twice, trying to gauge her sincerity. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to hold on to my pride and keep her at arm's length, but another part of me, the part that still wanted a relationship with her, felt a pang of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe it wasn't too late. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I put the phone down and closed my eyes, letting myself feel the weight of it all. Emily had hurt me, yes, but I had to be honest with myself. This wasn't just about her. It was about me. It was about me learning to set boundaries, about not letting people take advantage of me, about knowing that I was worth more than being treated like an afterthought. The next morning, I called her. "Emily," I said, my voice steady, "I don't know where we go from here, but I'm willing to try. But I need you to understand that things can't just go back to how they were. I won't accept being treated like an afterthought again." "I get it, Mom," she replied, her voice softer than before. "I'm sorry. I promise I'll do better. I'll show up. I'll be there." And for the first time in months, I believed her. Not because I was being naive, but because I knew that this was a turning point for both of us. We made plans to meet. It wasn't going to be a grand gesture, but it didn't need to be. It was a small step, a hesitant but necessary step toward rebuilding something real. Something that wasn't based on guilt or expectation, but on mutual respect. And for once, I wasn't just waiting for her to change. I was changing too. When we met, it wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't a tearful apology followed by a perfect reunion. It was just two people sitting down and acknowledging that things had been broken, and that was enough for me, enough for us. We talked for hours, slowly working through the years of hurt. We talked about the trip, about why I felt abandoned, about how we both had missed each other, even when we didn't know how to show it. It wasn't easy, but it was real, and that was what I needed, realness. And as we sat there, in that quiet cafe, sipping our coffee, I realized that this wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward, together, on new terms, and that, more than anything, felt like freedom. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was mine, and it was hers. And in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, I would never again be the woman waiting in the airport, waiting for someone to come back for me. I would be the woman who decided when and where she would show up for herself, and that, in itself, was enough. The weeks after that cafe meeting passed with a strange sort of calmness. Emily and I had begun rebuilding, but it wasn't as simple as brushing off the past and pretending everything was okay. It wasn't a perfect relationship, nor was I expecting it to be. But there was a shift, something new I could feel when we talked or spent time together. It wasn't the easy, comfortable connection we once had, but it was something real, something worth working for. I'd taken the first step, and now it was Emily's turn. I wasn't going to carry the weight of the past alone anymore. She had to show me that she could be the daughter I deserved, not the one who only reached out when it was convenient or when she needed something. She had to prove that she understood, not just in words but in actions, that I wasn't a burden, that I wasn't too old to be treated with respect. One evening, a few weeks after that conversation, Emily called me. There was hesitation in her voice when she asked, "Mom, I was thinking about going to that museum you've always wanted to visit, the one with the art exhibit. Would you want to come with me this Saturday?" I was surprised. I hadn't expected her to reach out like this. I wasn't sure what had changed, but I was willing to see where this new dynamic could take us. I wasn't about to let my guard down entirely, but I knew this was an opportunity to see if she meant it. To see if she was truly ready to put in the effort. "I'd love that, Emily," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Let's make it happen." Saturday arrived, and I spent the morning getting ready, making sure I was comfortable yet presentable. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I did want to make an effort. As I stood in front of the mirror, I caught my reflection: gray hair, a few more lines around my eyes than I liked, but a sense of pride in who I was, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I waited for her at the front door, the excitement in my chest growing, though I tried to suppress it. I wasn't about to let my hopes get too high, but when Emily pulled into the driveway, I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my lips. She stepped out of the car, a little nervous, but smiling at me in a way that felt real. She wasn't just putting on an act. She wasn't pretending. She was showing up. "Hi, Mom," she said, walking up the steps with an almost shy energy. "Ready?" "Ready," I replied, my smile genuine. We didn't talk much on the drive to the museum. There was still an awkwardness between us, but I didn't mind. I wasn't in a rush to fill every silence with words. It felt good just to be in her presence again, even if we weren't fully there yet. Sometimes healing doesn't happen in big gestures. Sometimes it happens in the quiet moments. The museum was busy with people, tourists and locals alike, but the moment we stepped into the first exhibit room, I could feel the tension starting to slip away. The art was beautiful, and as we walked from one piece to the next, I saw her looking at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time: curiosity. She was trying to understand me, not as her mother, but as the woman I had always been beneath that label. "This one's my favorite," I said, pointing to a painting of a field bathed in golden sunlight. "It reminds me of the summer we spent at Grandma's house. You were just a little girl." She smiled at the memory. "I remember that. You used to tell me stories about how much fun you had there when you were younger. I guess I didn't really think about that much." I nodded, but inside I felt a wave of something bittersweet. "You know, Emily, it's funny. I spent so many years telling you about my life, about the things I loved, but I never asked you about yours. I never really took the time to listen." She turned to me then, her expression softening. "I'm sorry for that, too, Mom. I've been so wrapped up in everything, I didn't realize how much I was missing." There it was, something real, a recognition of where we had both gone wrong. We weren't fixing the past, and we weren't pretending it didn't matter, but we were learning to listen, to see each other for who we really were. I had spent so much time trying to teach her, trying to make her understand my point of view, that I had forgotten to see her for who she was. Not just my daughter, but a grown woman with her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own struggles. As we continued through the museum, our conversation flowed a little easier. It was still slow and hesitant at times, but I could feel the walls we had both built between us starting to crumble. By the time we reached the last exhibit, I realized something important. This wasn't about fixing everything at once. It wasn't about undoing all the hurt. It was about taking the small steps. It was about showing up, even when it was difficult. After we left the museum, Emily invited me to dinner. We sat at a small restaurant, talking about everything and nothing. I didn't bring up the past. I didn't bring up that awful moment in the airport or the years of feeling overlooked. Instead, I just focused on the here and now, on this moment with her. Over dinner, Emily looked at me with a seriousness that caught me off guard. "Mom, I know I've messed up, but I want you to know something. I don't take you for granted anymore. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection. Not perfect, not flawless, but real. "I know, sweetheart," I said quietly. "I know." As we left the restaurant, Emily reached out, gently taking my hand in hers. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. We didn't need to speak. We didn't need to apologize anymore. We were starting something new, something based on mutual respect, not expectations. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about rebuilding our relationship. It was about rebuilding myself, too. I wasn't just her mother. I was Margaret, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally seen. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it wasn't everything I had hoped for, but it was a beginning. And that was enough. It's strange, isn't it? How healing doesn't always look the way you expect it to. How it doesn't happen in one grand gesture or in a flood of apologies. Sometimes it happens in the quiet, in the small moments when you least expect it. And that's how I found myself standing there one evening in early autumn, watching Emily in the kitchen, preparing dinner for the first time in what felt like ages. I had spent so many years trying to make up for the cracks in our relationship that I hadn't realized how much I was missing, how much I needed her to step up to. It was almost funny how we had fallen into this new routine, this new way of being with each other. After our day at the museum, Emily had made a real effort to reach out, not in the way I was used to, brief messages or obligatory phone calls, but in the way you do when you genuinely want to connect. We started spending time together again, not every day, but enough that I could feel the change, feel the shift between us. It wasn't just about her trying to make things right anymore. It was about me finally allowing her to be a part of my life again, on my terms. That evening, Emily invited me over for dinner, just the two of us. She had called earlier that day to ask if I wanted to try a new recipe she had found online. I'd agreed, though I had to admit that part of me still felt skeptical. It wasn't that I didn't want to give her a chance. It was that I wasn't sure if this effort would be just another false start, another one of those promises that would fizzle out when the next inconvenience came along. But I went, because this time I wanted to see if she really meant it. When I arrived, the smell of garlic and onions filled the air, and I was momentarily thrown back to when she was a child, cooking with me in the kitchen, her little hands clumsily stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce. I hadn't realized how much I missed those simple moments, how much I had longed for the version of our relationship where we laughed and talked, not with the weight of unspoken resentment between us. "Mom, you're here." Emily greeted me with a warm smile, her eyes bright. She was wearing an apron with a silly little slogan on it, and for a moment I almost forgot about the years of distance between us. She looked happy, truly happy. "You look like you're in your element," I said, my voice softer than I meant. I smiled back at her, taking in the way the kitchen was alive with the smell of dinner, the soft hum of a playlist playing in the background. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. She laughed lightly, her hands moving efficiently as she chopped vegetables. I figured we'd try something different tonight. No fancy restaurant, just us. I nodded, watching her work. "I think that sounds perfect." We didn't talk much at first. I could tell she was nervous, trying so hard to get everything just right, and I let her. This was her way of showing me that she cared, that she wasn't going to give up just because things had been difficult, and I wanted to let her do it on her own terms without rushing her. without expecting more than she was ready to give. After a while, Emily placed the meal in front of me, a simple but beautifully cooked dish. She sat down across from me, and we both stared at our plates for a moment before she spoke. "Mom," she said, her voice quieter than usual, "I don't think I ever really understood how much I took you for granted until recently. Until everything hit a breaking point. I wasn't just being careless. I was avoiding something. I was avoiding you. I didn't know how to deal with the fact that you weren't always going to be there, and that scared me. I'm sorry for that. I know I've hurt you." I hadn't expected her to open up like that, not so openly, not so vulnerably. I took a deep breath, my hand reaching for my glass of water. For the first time in a long time, I saw my daughter for who she was, not just my child, but a grown woman who had her own struggles, her own fears. "Emily," I started slowly, "we've both been holding on to things. I've been holding on to the past, thinking I could fix everything if I just tried harder. But I can't. I can't fix it. I can only move forward. I can't keep expecting you to be the daughter you were when you were younger, just like you can't keep expecting me to be the mother you need me to be when I'm not that person anymore." She looked down at her plate as if my words were heavy, and I could see that she was processing them. She hadn't liked hearing that, but it was the truth. We couldn't go back, and I didn't want to anymore. We were different people now, but that didn't mean we couldn't find a way to build something new together. "I know," Emily said, her voice small but resolute. "I don't want to go back either. I don't want to keep living in the past. I want to figure out what this new, whatever this is between us, looks like." I nodded, a sense of understanding passing between us. "We'll figure it out. We'll take it slow, but we'll figure it out." She smiled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. I smiled back, but for a moment, we both just sat there, looking at each other, really looking at each other, for the first time in what felt like forever. And in that silence, I felt something shift, something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Dinner was quiet after that, not awkward, but comfortable. We ate, talked about little things, laughed at a few jokes. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the way I had imagined it in the past, but it was real. It was progress, and for now that was enough. When the evening came to an end, I stood up, ready to leave. But before I walked out the door, Emily stopped me. "Mom," she said, her voice unsteady, "I know it'll take time, but I need you to know that I'm here. I'm trying. I'm not going anywhere. I mean that." I stopped in my tracks and turned to face her. For a moment, I just looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the sincerity in her eyes. And for the first time, I believed her. Not because she was perfect, but because she was trying. And that was all I needed. "I know, Emily," I said softly. "I know." And with that, I walked out the door, feeling the weight of everything that had happened between us, but also feeling lighter than I had in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was something real. Something that, for the first time in a long time, felt like it had a future. And that was enough. It was enough to keep going, enough to start again. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance, one where Emily and I carefully navigated this new version of our relationship. Neither of us was fully comfortable yet. There were still moments when old habits crept in, when I'd catch myself slipping back into the role of the ever-patient, ever-forgiving mother. But something was different now. I was aware of it. She was aware of it. And every time we shared a small victory, like a laugh over a cup of coffee or a quiet conversation about life, I knew we were moving in the right direction. We started meeting more often. It wasn't a daily thing, but it was enough to show me that Emily was committed. She'd invite me over for dinner, and sometimes we'd take walks together, something we hadn't done in years. There were still silences between us, but they weren't uncomfortable silences. They were filled with the unspoken understanding that we were both learning to trust again. One evening after dinner, we sat on the porch, the cool autumn air wrapping around us as we talked. It was one of those rare, still moments where everything felt right. Emily was talking about her work, about her recent promotion at the marketing firm she worked for, and I listened intently, proud of how far she'd come, but also proud of how far we both come together. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said that day," Emily said, her voice quieter than usual, "about not just being your daughter, but being someone who shows up for you, who's there for you. I think I finally get it. I haven't been there for you the way I should have been." I felt my heart tighten, but in a good way. It was one thing to hear her apologize, but to hear her acknowledge her part in everything. That meant something. "I'm proud of you," I said softly, my hand resting on hers. "And I know you're trying. I just need to see it. I need to see that you're really in this." "I am," she replied quickly, her eyes meeting mine with that quiet sincerity I hadn't seen before. "I don't want to lose you, Mom. I've been so focused on everything else that I didn't even realize what was slipping away until it almost didn't matter anymore." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling on my chest. "It's not about losing me, Emily. It's about learning how to be with me, to see me, to respect me as more than just your mother." "I know," she said, nodding, "and I'm trying, I promise." There was a long pause before I spoke again. "I know you're trying, honey." "I know, and I'm trying too." I wasn't sure if those were the words she needed to hear or if they were the words I needed to say, but in that moment they felt like the truth. We weren't perfect. We were still learning to trust each other again, and that was okay. We were building something new, and that was the most important thing. As the evening wore on, we didn't talk much more. It didn't need to be said again. There was something more powerful in the quiet, in just being there side by side. I realized that the most important thing I could do was to let her show up in her own way, on her own terms. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be real. But as much as Emily had shown me that she was changing, there was still a part of me that wasn't ready to completely trust again. The scars from those years of neglect, from feeling like I was always the one holding everything together, didn't vanish overnight. I had been hurt, and it wasn't something that could be erased with a few apologies or promises, but I was learning how to navigate those feelings, how to let go of the resentment that had built up over time. A few days later, Emily invited me to a family gathering at her house. It was the first time we were going to be in the same space as Robert and the kids since everything had happened. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't sure if things had truly changed, or if this was just another attempt to get back to the way things used to be. When I walked into her house, I was immediately met with the chaos of a family gathering: laughter, kids running around, the clinking of glasses and plates. It was familiar in a way, but it felt different this time. Emily was standing by the door, greeting everyone, but when she saw me, her face softened. She stepped over, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "I'm so glad you could make it, Mom." And in that moment I knew. This was the first time in years that I wasn't just invited into their lives. I was included. I wasn't an afterthought. I was a part of it. The evening went well. We talked, we laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to fight for attention, for affection. Emily was present, her family was present, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were all on the same page. But I knew the real test was still to come. Emily had made strides, but it was going to take time. I wasn't going to trust overnight, not after everything that had happened. But for the first time, I was willing to give her that time. I was willing to meet her halfway. We weren't where we had been, but we weren't where we started either. That night, as I sat quietly in my chair, watching the kids play and Emily talking with Robert, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Not the kind you pretend to have, not the kind you force for the sake of everyone else, but the kind that comes when you finally let go of the anger, the hurt, and the resentment. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for someone to change and just let them show up as they are. And as I watched Emily, I realized that maybe I wasn't the only one who had been waiting for things to change. Maybe, for once, we were both showing up for each other, in the ways that mattered, and that, for me, was enough. We weren't perfect, we weren't fixed, but we were something new, and that was all I needed. As the night drew to a close, Emily walked over to me, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry for everything." I didn't say anything right away. I just hugged her back, feeling the warmth of her sincerity. And in that moment, I realized that love, real love, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect apologies. It was about showing up every day, even when it's hard. And maybe that was the greatest thing I could ask for. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything anymore. I was just living. And that was enough. It's been a few months now since that night, and as I sit here in the quiet of my living room, I can't help but reflect on everything that has changed. Everything that I have changed. It wasn't an overnight transformation, not by any means. It wasn't a quick fix, nor was it a painless journey. But I can finally say that I'm at peace. I've found a balance I didn't know I was capable of, between forgiving and protecting myself, between loving and setting boundaries. In the months since our family gathering, things with Emily have continued to evolve. It's not perfect. Nothing ever is, but it's real, and that's all I ever really wanted. We talk more openly now, and she listens, not just to what I'm saying, but to what I'm not saying. I don't have to beg for her attention anymore. She reaches out, she shows up, and that, to me, is the most important thing. I'm proud of her, proud of the woman she's becoming, the one who's learning that life doesn't revolve around her, but it doesn't leave her behind either. And I've learned that it's okay to be proud of myself, too. I'm not just her mother. I'm Margaret, and I'm worthy of respect, of love, and of my own space. That's something I had to teach myself. I wasn't just waiting for Emily to change. I was changing, too. I had spent so many years accommodating everyone else, making sure everyone else felt okay, that I had lost track of what I needed. I didn't even know who I was anymore, but now I do, and that realization has made all the difference. The other day, Emily asked me if I wanted to go on another trip with her and her family. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to just jump into something out of obligation. But then I thought about it. This wasn't about them asking me to go. This was about me deciding that I wanted to go, on my terms. "I'd love to," I said, my voice steady and sure, "but this time I'm choosing the place." She smiled at me, a real warm smile, and for a moment I could see the difference in her eyes. She wasn't just seeing me as her mother anymore. She was seeing me as Margaret, the woman with her own life, her own voice. It was subtle, but it was there, and that's what I needed. I didn't need her to fix everything for me or to make up for the past. I just needed her to see me, to understand that I was my own person, not just her mother. The trip was incredible. We went to a cabin in the mountains, a quiet place where we could just be, no distractions, no expectations. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to fight for my place in their world. I was there because I wanted to be, because I was wanted, and that felt different from anything I had ever known. As I sit here now, looking out at the sunset, I realize that I've learned something far more valuable than I could have ever expected. It's not just about mending relationships, it's about mending yourself. It's about finding the courage to stand up for yourself, to let go of the things that hurt you, and to accept that the people around you are just as imperfect as you are. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be treated with respect. That doesn't mean you don't deserve to be loved for who you truly are, not for what others think you should be. Emily and I will never go back to what we once were, and that's okay. I don't need to recapture the past. What we have now is better. It's more real. We're both learning to show up for each other in ways that matter. And the most important thing I've learned through all of this is that I don't need anyone to give me permission to live my life. I don't need to wait for approval. I can make my own decisions, I can set my own boundaries, and I can choose my own happiness. I'm not waiting for anything anymore. I'm living. And that, my friends, is the greatest victory of all. The journey may not be over, but I'm no longer afraid of where it's taking me, because for the first time in a long time, I know I'm enough, and that's all I need to carry with me. I'm enough, and that's everything.